Maxwell or Pascal? Tegra X1 or Tegra P1? What is the difference? Are any of these more powerful than the Xbox One or even PS4? And which one will keep third parties on the Switch?
Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Nintendo Switch News. Today, we are joined by Spawn Wave to go deep and precise into the most lasting detail of Nintendo's new system, the technical specs. Since after months of anticipation, we finally have the necessary information to give you our most comprehensive specifications comparison, CPU, GPU, and memory. We will look at the differences between AMD's X architecture found in the Xbox One and PS4, and Nvidia's ARM architecture found in Nintendo Switch. In this process, we will also be touching on the differences found between AMD and Nvidia on PC.
In terms of CPU, we know that the Xbox One has 8 cores, x86 64-bit AMD custom architecture with a frequency of 1.75 GHz. The PlayStation 4 has as well 8-core x64-bit AMD custom architecture, but with a frequency of 165 GHz. Time for the Switch, and here we have two options based on the current information available. We know that Nvidia themselves publicly stated last October that the system is powered by their custom Tegra chip, and that its GPU is based on the same architecture as the world's top performing GeForce gaming graphics cards. As a result, it is probable that the Switch might run on something between or on the Maxwell X1 or the Pascal P1. So how do these CPUs fare? Well, the Maxwell X1 is an aging and outgoing chip with a 64-bit quad-core ARM A57 CPU and a frequency of 2 GHz.
Pascal, or P1, on the other hand, is the next generation NVIDIA chip with 64 bits quad-core ARM A57 architecture and a frequency of 2 GHz. Found in the beast that is the GeForce GTX 1080, the chip is barely 16 nanometers wide, and as a result easier and less expensive to produce than Maxwell's 20 nanometer. For reference, this was stated during the NVIDIA 1080 keynote last year. Fun fact, there's a reason why NVIDIA spent more than a mission to Mars when developing the Pascal. So how does this compare to the Xbox One and PlayStation 4? For one, we need to keep in mind that the x86 might offer more power, but is more complicated and less efficient than the ARM A57 and A73. In other words, the Switch will, with its architecture, be able to offer more CPU power through overclocking for less. And just for reference, the Wii U has an abysmal 1.23 GHz.
Down to the category where it really counts, GPU power. Once again, here there is a clear difference in the architecture between Xbox One and PS4, which run on AMD ATI, and the Switch that runs on Maxwell, Pascal, or something in between. The two systems from Microsoft and Sony might run on the same type of AMD GPU, but they have different numbers of cores. Since, with its 768 shader cores, the Xbox One outputs 1.31 teraflops, and that isn't even close to PS4. Since, despite having an unspecified number of cores, it reaches up all the way to 1.84 teraflops.
Well, actually, the Switch, as we said before, is running on a custom-made Tegra processor by Nvidia with the same architecture as their GeForce gaming graphics card, likely Pascal. In this regard, we need to say it straight out. The Switch numbers that Eurogamer have had access to so far come from one source, the Nvidia Jetson Maxwell TX1. Nevertheless, as we all know, the future is in the Nvidia's Pascal 1. With it, the Switch will manage to reach higher clocking speeds out of this Tegra custom chip, and as a consequence, push to a higher teraflop level compared to the Maxwell.
A Pascal and Maxwell flop are by power standards equal to each other, but if you look closer you'll see that the Pascal or P1, unlike the Maxwell or X1, is way more efficient, which allows for it to reach higher clock speeds and a teraflop output to say something in between 1 to 1.5 teraflops at floating point 16, which could mean that the system could reach beyond 1080p in 60 frames, and if you wondered, the Wii U had an abysmal 0.35 teraflops. But how does this really compare to the Xbox One or PS4? In theory, the NVIDIA architecture should be more powerful than the AMD ATI when the two are stacked at the same teraflop level. This assumption is based on PC performance comparisons between NVIDIA and AMD cards. Sorry, Xbox and PS4. Based on these factors, we can state the Switch is either on par or above the Xbox One GPU-wise depending on clock speeds, but it will most likely be underneath the PS4's GPU, but also because of its memory. Since the real reason why the PS4 is more powerful than the Xbox One is due to its GDDR5 memory. Xbox One has a DDR3 supplementary high-speed 32MB ES RAM. The Switch will likely have low-power DDR4, which fits with the previous Foxconn leak.
This means that the RAM should be below the PS4, but above or equal to the Xbox One. The Xbox One and the PS4 have 8GB unified RAM, where the 4GB go to the actual game, while the remaining 4 goes to the operating system. The Nintendo Switch will most likely have 4GB unified RAM, but just as with the CPU and GPU, NVIDIA with its ARM architecture differs from the AMD x86 when it comes to its RAM needs. Since as noted by several commenters in our previous specs video, the Switch with its ARM architecture will not need the 8GB found in the x86, but will do with 4GB. Remember, we are talking about apples and oranges here. In short, as long as this generation lasts, it is probable that the Switch will be able to compete with the base model PS4 and Xbox One, and thus be able to gain the same level of third-party support, as the Switch will be easier to port to than the Xbox One.
Even so, as expected, the system will be nowhere near the PS4 Pro or Xbox Scorpio, since the PS4 Pro with its 4.2 teraflops is barely able to upscale to 4K, and even though the Scorpio has been promised to have native 4K 30 frames, don't expect it to be cheap as it will need at least 6 teraflops to surpass that target. In other words, let's forget at this instance about 4K on the Nintendo Switch. It will not happen. 1 teraflop or 1.5 teraflops will in this league mark no difference. But as previously mentioned, 1.5 teraflops might make it possible to reach more than 1080p 60 frames in docked state. But if the drop to 40% performance of the power in undocked state is correct due to needs to conserve battery and avoid overheating, then it could signify that the system might still be able to output 1080p resolutions while in undocked state, as the drop will be lower with the Pascal than Maxwell.
But how about the internal storage? Apparently it's just like the premium Wii U 32GB. Needless to say, this will pale in comparison to PlayStation 4's and Xbox One's 500GB and 1TB hard drives. The rumoured 32GB internal flash memory would in this case be disappointing, while a 64GB hard drive would be acceptable under one condition. And the extra one condition being that the Switch, just like the 3DS, will offer an extra slot for SD cards to extend into the system's storage in any undocked state, so long as it can stay above 150GB. But wouldn't 150GB also be too little? Not exactly, since the Switch is a cartridge-based system, while the PS4 and Xbox One are disc-based consoles. As a result, they need additional storage for installation of games before they're ready to be played. Naturally, this process takes up a large chunk of internal storage, even when you don't want to download titles from online stores.
In other words, 500GB and 1TB hard drives are needed on the PS4 and Xbox One, but not on the Switch. Since it's a cartridge-based system, there is no necessity to install games. In fact, this is another great benefit on the Switch, since the cartridge games can be played instantly without installs. The result is a quicker and more fluent game experience with shorter loading times. And this is where the Switch differs the most from the Wii U, since an 8GB or even 32GB premium hard drive was garbage for games such as Xenoblade Chronicles X, which required alone 12GB install space. Gladly, this will not occur on the Switch.
But for now, we want to see your opinions in the comments on the rumored specs of the Switch, Unreal Engine 4. Please like, share, comment, and if you are new, subscribe to Commonwealth Realm, Dr.Wily, and Spawn Wave for more Nintendo Switch videos.
50,000! It happened! Haha! And I have a great intro. Take a look at this.